Hey everyone, I'm Anthony Cosgrove, the co-founder of Harbr. Today I'm joined by Caroline Zimmerman, who is the Director of Data Products and Strategy at Profusion. In her role, she sets the overall data strategy and data product roadmap for her clients and then brings those to life. Before Profusion, she also built and led a data team at BMG, a global music company. Caroline, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so looking forward to this one. Our conversation the other day was super interesting. Just to get us going, can you kind of just tell us a bit more about your role at Profusion? It sounds like you're kind of really hands-on in making data products a reality. So kind of keen to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think of data strategy as just setting up the portfolio of data products that you're planning for and prioritizing them according to, effort and expected value. And then, so I start out with that, just the roadmap. What are we actually doing? And then working with the delivery teams, they're usually, like a mix of data engineers and data scientists, data analysts, data viz folks. And then also could also include like user researchers, subject matter experts, but just bringing that product team together to deliver one of those data products. So like an example might be for an automotive company who need to help their like car dealers curate their to-do lists better. How can we use data to help them figure out what they should focus on? How to surface like high propensity clients that they should call that day. And like that would be an example of the kind of work I do. And so it's really like end to end, making sure that the data product delivers value. I guess that's in some ways my main job.
Mm-hmm.
And measuring that value and communicating that value, and then making sure that we have the right resources to make all that happen.
Awesome. And is it always the first product?
Is it always the first product? What do you mean?
So when you're kind of devising this strategy, as you see these sort of series of different data products that deliver the
Mhm.
value, kind of when you're working with your customers, is it usually the first product that they've built? Do they typically already have a portfolio? Kind of how's that working?
I mean, it really depends. Sometimes you're starting from nothing, and typically those will be like smaller, younger companies, right? But
Hmm.
if you're thinking about bigger corporates, they would always have a base that they're working from already. But
Okay.
maybe they had built some things that didn't get adopted. For example, that's pretty typical, right? So maybe they built like a propensity model um, and a churn model. And anyway, they have like a series of different things that they've built, and those haven't ended up being adopted by the sales team or the marketing team, right? And so then we would go in and like help them reshape that product so that it does get adopted.
Cool. And just in that like short intro, you've already spoken about kind of propensity models, churn models, kind of insights into customers built into workflows. It's a question that everybody's been talking about a lot recently, but like what do you consider to be a data product? And then kind of conversely, what would you consider not to be a data product?
Yeah, I think I was telling you the other day, I don't find that question that interesting. Not as a reflection on me, but like I know that that is a debate, and I just
Yeah.
find that debate really boring. Um, in a way, because who cares? I mean, I guess it doesn't, because those definitions, I think they're fluid. I just think they're fluid. And to me, like the stuff that I work on that I consider a data product in my daily role is just a thing that delivers some kind of user experience that uses data, usually to help a decision of
Yeah.
some kind. And I guess there's data products where you're actually putting together a data feed and packaging that up and selling it. But in my world, it's much more internal facing data
Yep.
products, and typically those would be decision support products with a strong data element going on in the background to deliver a recommendation or an insight.
So we had a guest on recently who was talking about how the sort of the payload within a data product, the actual component, could be anything from a database down to an individual data element in some cases. It sounds like you kind of agree with that in this sort of idea that it can just be super flexible. It's kind of what it needs to be to deliver kind of the value. Is that fair, or have you got
Yeah,
like
and I mean, I
stronger
guess,
views?
what I've heard of often is the distinction like if it's a one off, it's probably not a product. If it's a repeatable thing, that is more than just for one person. It's more like for a persona. You are building to solve a specific problem over time for a
Hmm.
persona rather than an ad hoc individual request where the CEO says, I want a piece of analysis to figure out what this group of customers is doing. That's probably not a data product, you know? But if that's like an ongoing analysis where that's something that they want surfaced more automatically and integrated into some kind of workflow or some kind of system, then it would become a data product.
Cool. And I mean, you've obviously got a lot of experience kind of building these products and kind of tying them into sort of a longer term strategy and vision. Interested in kind of the lessons you've learned along the way and kind of any advice you'd kind of give to a younger version of yourself who's maybe just starting out.
Yeah, I mean the most important one is don't just build what people ask you for, even if they're very senior. You know,
Okay.
I think that's the main one. I think the principles that I always hold close to my heart, and they're all principles that are a result of battle scars. They're not like theoretical. They're more just I learned what happened when I didn't follow these principles, and I never want to be in that position again.
Okay.
And those four principles for me are define success early on. So, what does success actually mean and look like for this thing that you're
Hmm.
building? And is everyone on the same page about that? Are all the different stakeholders on the same page?
Hmm.
Um, because, yeah, you know, like for a data scientist, it might be the accuracy of your model. For the marketing team,
Yeah.
that's very unlikely to be the success definition of success. It's probably like build a churn model, but then make sure that you're retaining customers as a
Yep.
result of those insights.
Yep.
Um, know your why. So why are you building this and why now?
Okay.
um, Understand end users in their context and how your solution fits in to that context and how it solves a whole problem for
Yep.
them. Just like understand the systems that they're already working in their workflows, just like know them, you know, and
Yeah.
understand how to try and integrate what you're doing into that instead of building some kind of standalone thing that they need to be trained on. You know,
Got it.
so for example, first principle for me is if you can build a visualization within an existing system, like a CRM system, like say Salesforce, do that instead of
Right.
going off and building it where someone's going to need another login. Or maybe you can integrate the dashboard directly into a Slack channel, right? Like just bring it into people's existing environment.
Yep.
Um, yeah, and make sure that it is like answering a question or providing direction and enabling action, right?
Yep.
So again, like understanding that end user and context and how they're going to action that information. And then the last one is just build iteratively, you know, and I think we're all
Yeah.
pretty familiar with that concept in the data product world. But yeah, just make sure that you're not going off and building something that's going to take you 6 months only to find out 6 months down the road that, you know, the user needs have changed or they were asking you for the wrong thing. Um, so those are like my founding, I guess yeah, just my foundational principles. Um, and again, I built things to requirement, like to perfect requirement. And those data products have been completely unused or like used once or twice, even though it was exactly following the spec, right? Because I didn't
Wow.
really understand how that embedded into a workflow or what
Yep.
problems we were trying to solve in my younger self.
Yeah. And just on one of the principles, you kind of mentioned something very briefly, but I think it's kind of really interesting. You sort of the why, which is obviously critical, but then you added like the why now. Could you
Hmm.
sort of talk a little more about that? Because I think timing is probably one of those things that's often overlooked.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really helpful to work within a burning platform of some kind
Hmm.
where this is not a nice to have, this is a must have. You're solving a critical pain point for somebody where if they can't, you know, yeah, if they can't overcome this, it's really going to hamper them being able to achieve their goal or like get their bonus, right? And yes, I think that burning platform is really helpful. You know, I did research with my old business school called INSEAD a number of years ago into factors for success for data leaders who are often
Hmm.
data product type people, right?
Hmm.
Because you're responsible for value and all of that. And one of the examples was, you know, it was a chief data officer at a big media company. And at the time, they were going through a big digital transformation. It was when newspapers were first moving online.
Hmm.
and they didn't know how they were going to make any money. Right. And so there was this real sense of burning platform. And he ended up being incredibly successful in his role because if they didn't innovate, they were going to die. Right. And then that company was owned by a larger conglomerate that had lots of different businesses. And so he went to go be like a VP of data or whatever for the conglomerate. And it didn't go well at all, even though he
Right.
was replicating the same playbook because there was no urgency around it. They were doing great. They were making lots of money. There wasn't that burning platform. And I think that the why now and the sense of urgency around we need this now, otherwise we might, go belly up, really gives a lot of it centers people around the same goal to feel like this is critical right now to us succeeding as a business or as a team. And that just lights a fire under everyone's bum,
Yeah, yeah,
That's really
absolutely.
helpful for getting stuff done.
Um, kind of would that be a criteria that you would kind of look for, kind of in all of your projects, or is that just
A
sort of
burning
something?
platform.
Yeah, or is that sort of like it's a good accelerator, but not necessary?
I do think you want to start out with the stuff. I think it depends where you are in your journey.
Hmm.
So I think if you need to bring people along on a journey, I would look for that. Yes. Because the burning problems are the ones that people care about and are going to invest in a way extracurricular time. A lot of the
Yeah.
time, the subject matter experts and like the business stakeholders that you need to engage, they already have full-time jobs, and the data thing, like the data product that they're participating in, is
Yeah.
often going to be some kind of extra add-on. And so they need to be really invested, either because success is going to have a big impact on their career, so it could
Hmm.
be a personal impetus, or because it is a burning platform and the problem really needs to be solved because they're really stuck on a thing. And like that's just going to help with engagement, right? And engagement
Yep.
is everything.
Perfect.
Just like get it, that's usually where we fall down, is just not having enough stakeholder engagement. And so just thinking about how you set things up from the beginning to
Yes.
choose those people who are like kind of naturally enthusiastic, but also have a real business incentive, like that they're going to stand to gain something from this being successful, you know, yeah, makes a
Got it.
big difference.
Perfect. And then your last point, I think, kind of very well made, and kind of as you mentioned, sort of, I think, kind of well understood. A lot of data product development now looking quite a lot like a lot of software development. So lots of agile practices, lots of iterative development, lots of good team working, trying to deliver value early and incrementally and sort of prove or disprove the hypotheses as you go. I often find people kind of find this quite difficult. And when we talk to people about data products, it's sort of something that's sort of tacked on the end of a 2-3 year technology or data transformation journey. So, I have to get all of my data into one place is something you hear a lot, or I have to move it all to the cloud, or this new database we've invested in, then I need to structure it, then I need to organize it, then I need to cleanse it, and then I need to make sure I've got good monitoring of it, and then I need to test it, and then maybe put some data contracts in, and there's this sort of really, really, really long and often kind of overwhelming kind of, I guess, sort of standard track that's sort of expected. Um, do you believe in that? Do you kind of wait until that foundation's there before you then go and have productive conversations, or do you kind of want to really get in much earlier and sort of avoid them necessarily having to go through that, or having to go through that with all of their data as opposed to just the data that counts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's sort of a solved question in a way, right? Like it doesn't work to go off and build things for 2 or 3 years and just like sit on it. I think in a world of cheap money and lower interest rates, maybe that kind of thing can fly. But I
Hmm.
think over the last couple of years, that doesn't fly anymore.
Yep.
I've just done another study on how private equity firms are leveraging data and AI to deliver increased value.
Yep.
And one of the principles in private equity, because private equity doesn't spend money unless they think they're going to, unless they strongly suspect that's going to deliver positive ROI. And that's why we did this study. It's just really interesting, right? Like what kind of data stuff do you invest in to get a return within a 2 year time frame?
Yep.
If you're going to own the company for 3 to 5 years. And what came out of that is you never go in and just like build a single source of truth, right? You would
Okay.
only ever build the minimum viable infrastructure you need to deliver on a use case, which is a growth initiative of some kind with a
Yeah.
data element. So, for example, maybe you want to understand who your best customers are,
Hmm.
right? Like, what are their characteristics? What are their behaviors? And how can you identify them early on so that you can, make sure you push those people through the funnel, like that you're spending more effort making sure those people move through and don't drop off in your customer journey, or you're going to acquire, spend more, more willing to spend a bit more money on people, on prospects who show those characteristics very early on, because their predicted customer lifetime value is higher. Like, you would build the minimum viable infrastructure you need in order to do that, and probably you would even, and the way that I heard it said multiple times in this study was, you don't build infrastructure horizontally, you build it
Hmm.
vertically in service of a particular growth initiative.
Nice.
So maybe for pricing, for example, right? Like, you want to optimize your pricing. And so you build out the data sets that you need in order to be able to do, for example, dynamic pricing, or just like rationalizing pricing, for your products if you're in a service industry, for example. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's always a balancing act, right? Because you also need to build that vertical piece of infrastructure to scale for the next one.
Yep.
And and I think it's also important to think of ROI as, okay, well, you would build this piece of infrastructure, but then that would help you deliver against 3 growth initiatives. So
Yep.
that would offset, but like the expense is going to be upfront, and then it's going to be much cheaper to deliver your 2 other growth initiatives. But I think it's
Yep.
just a balancing act, right? And I guess the balancing act is always, when you've delivered the prototype that has a bunch of tech debt but works,
Yep.
then the exec team might not understand why you need to make further investments to make that a lot more robust. So I think it's just, I don't know. I think it's that you kind of got to play it by ear a little
Yeah.
bit to find what that balance is for
Yeah.
that particular organization where they're at in their journey.
Awesome. I love that comment of like minimum viable infrastructure as well as the sort of vertical infrastructure, and kind of how you started by talking about products and strategy, and the strategy almost being a culmination of multiple products. Like, that makes a lot of sense now, and I can sort of imagine you having a conversation about kind of where are the growth opportunities, where are the burning platforms. Let's start there. Let's understand then, as we sort of move into a more strategic mindset, the minimum viable infrastructure for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versus just one, and that's completely throwaway, or as you said, kind of bogged down in technical debt, not very replicable,
Yeah,
potentially falls over a lot and is
yeah,
unstable. But
yeah.
starting from that perspective of, give me a small number of really solid value propositions, and then let's do the minimum to realize value there before then growing out.
Yeah. Benny Benford, who's the former chief data officer at Jaguar Land Rover, just has a great rule of thumb for iterative delivery. He says, you want to give people, your stakeholders, a sense of surprise every 2 weeks around learning something they didn't already know about their business. And I just think that's really good. Drip feed surprising insight, and then use the excitement around that to get money for investment. But I think that whole sort of like, deliver quick wins to get people on board, blah, blah, blah. Quick wins are hard. I've never really met a quick win, if I'm completely honest,
Mm,
in data.
yeah.
Um, but I do think that delivering surprising insight is a great rule of thumb for how you give people a sense that they're getting incremental value, because then it's like, oh wow, we learned something about customers that we didn't know. That's cool. Buys
Yeah.
you a lot of goodwill. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, indeed.
Um,
Yeah. If not a win, still useful. We've actually got Benny coming on the show, so he's actually on the next podcast. So that's a like a
he's great.
perfect tee up for
I
that.
highly recommend following him and subscribing to his newsletter.
Indeed, indeed. And we're sort of kind of close to time, unfortunately. But kind of, where do you see the kind of data product space heading? I know you've been in it for a while. Patrick, who we had on the last podcast, has been doing it for like 2 decades. But it's certainly
Wow.
something that's gathered a head of steam, over the last year or two. Kind of, how do you see that? How do you see it evolving?
Yeah, I guess we were talking about this. I think the way I see it evolving is that it's the thing that doesn't evolve in a
Hmm.
way, in the sense that it's like there's such an overwhelming amount of tools and tech and, in that data ecosystem. And I think that our job is always to bring it back to these really evergreen principles, which is what's your why? What's the definition of success? How do you get stakeholders on board to all of that? Understand end users in their context, deliver iteratively. Like these are all those perennial good management. It's just like good leadership, honestly.
Mm.
But it's bringing back those principles of like, it's so easy to get distracted with all these shiny new tools that evolve super quickly. And especially with like, obviously Gen AI and all the hype around that. I think our job is to actually take a step back from all that hype and bring it back to those first principles.
Yeah.
Um, because those tools are such an easy distraction. And I think our job is again, just those first principles. So I don't know how much it'll evolve as much
Okay.
as like we just need to keep emphasizing and coming back to these questions of value. What's your why, who are you building this, and how
Yeah.
is this solution going to deliver value to them? Because I think that, there's a lot to be distracted by.
Yeah.
And so I think our job is to prevent everyone from having ADD around tools and just coming back to like, yep, this is what we're trying to do. This is why we're trying to do it. This is why it's
Yeah.
important.
Perfect. So just stay true to product management, essentially, regardless of the technologies, regardless of the sort of variance in the opportunities that present themselves.
Yeah, something like that.
Awesome. Well, look, that's a perfect point to end it on. Caroline, thank you so much for joining us. It's been super interesting to listen to you and hear about what you're doing in Profusion. If anyone would like to learn more about that, head to profusion.com. And if you're interested in setting up a commercial or enterprise data marketplace or moving things forward with data products, check out harbrdata.com. Thanks for listening.